It's Monday, just got back from National. I am exhausted. It was an incredible week. We're going to go into all the details. So if you're like me, you're a little tired, grab yourself a little coffee, get yourself energized, sit down, sit back, relax. I'm going to try to go through everything, all the details, and all the highlights, and all my takes of the National at the end as well. So let's get right into it. Welcome to the most passionate content for card collecting on YouTube, possibly the whole entire internet. As usual, I am your host, Jake Roy, 90s B-Ball Cards here on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, a little bit of TikTok, and I failed you last week without any content on any of those platforms, really. And I am tired. You can probably hear in my voice. My energy is a little low, a little sleepy. I'm working on 2 coffees today, and I usually drink coffee maybe every other day or less. So if that gives you any indication of how I'm doing. But yes, last week I said I was going to throw content on all the different platforms. You might have heard the Wi-Fi and internet situation in Atlantic City was subpar at best. And of course we didn't have a ton of time, so even when you did have internet, there was a ton of stuff going on, so it was difficult to do all the stuff we wanted to do. So here we are today, so I'm going to go through all the different stuff and try to post on multiple different platforms to give you some of the highlights and stuff. So let's get right into the fire, starting with my travel day on Tuesday. All right, and here we go. So I'm not going to name names of everybody I met because I'm surely going to miss some people as we go through. I'll name people as it makes sense, but if I forget you, I met so many people. There was so much stuff that happened. It was such a great weekend. I tried to put all my thoughts together in a quick document so I don't miss anything, but there's certainly going to be highlights that I'm going to remember, down the road. So here we go. So on Tuesday, the plan was for me to drive with my father down to New Haven, Connecticut, catch a train from New Haven into Philadelphia, and then catch the New Jersey Transit from Philadelphia all the way into Atlantic City. They bring you right into the convention center. So my train in New Haven was about 30 minutes late. So got on the train, pretty seamless there. Got into New Jersey. The person I talked to said, go to the information booth. They will direct you, tell you when the next train is, so on and so forth. Got into Philadelphia, and they told me that I had just missed the New Jersey Transit to Atlantic City. So they told me, well, you can jump on a bus and get to this station or this station, and they should be coming in the next half an hour. That would be a little bit better for you. Or you can wait here, and it's going to take about an hour and a half or more for the next train to Atlantic City. None of those options sounded great. At this point, I was already pretty tired from traveling, so I did not want to jump on a bus that I didn't know what time was coming or anything like that. So I said, forget about all that. I'm just going to pay the price for an Uber at that point. So I grabbed an Uber all the way from Philadelphia to Atlantic City. It was a long ride, got me all the way into my hotel room. So when I was heading out, I was planning on getting into Atlantic City around 2:30 or 3 o'clock. At that point, I was thinking I'd probably be at the convention center, and I'd go right into the show and try to see what I could see on that early setup day with my media pass. But that didn't happen. I didn't get into Atlantic City to my hotel at that point until 4:30, right around there. And at that point, the show floor was closing even for exhibitors. So I said, forget about all that. I'm just going to get myself situated in my room, reach out to some people that I know might be in town, and see what I can do for the evening. So that's exactly what I did. Went to the Hard Rock for dinner, met up with some friends, had a great time. It was a great little kind of way to start the week, a little bit more low-key while we still had some energy. And then after we ate dinner, had a couple drinks, had some great conversation. A few of us went and played basketball, and I did not have any sort of plans to play basketball, so I was not prepared with my athletic gear. So I was playing in some Yeezys, which was funny because some of the people at the court actually commented on, you're playing basketball in Yeezys? And I said, well, I'm trying to. My 35-year-old body, I haven't played a competitive game of basketball in quite some time. So when I was in a little bit better shape and playing a little bit more regularly, in the last couple of years, I probably would have performed a little bit better. But it was a friendly game. It was a good warm-up for the card ladder game that was coming later on in Wednesday afternoon. So that was fun to start the day there. But then went back to our rooms. At that point, I knew I needed to get some rest, get a shower, get to bed, and get some energy going for the next day. So at this point, Joe, I knew was going to be meeting up with me on Wednesday, so I got up, I got ready to go. I got going pretty early, and I got to the venue right around 10 o'clock on Wednesday, so able to get in again with that early entry pass, which is a great benefit. Would have been even better benefit if I had some Wi-Fi and could have shared some stuff, but I did the best we could. So before I had gone to the National, I made a little map. They have kind of a map on the National website, and I marked some different booths that I knew I wanted to see, either people that I wanted to meet up with that I knew would be set up at those booths, or dealers that I knew might have cards of interest or that I've had relationships with that I knew I wanted to go and check in with them from years past. So I had to take a couple of minutes to get my bearings, because once I walked in the door, I thought I was in a different quadrant of the show than I actually was, and there were a couple of people who I couldn't find on the map, so I was trying to kind of keep an eye out for them, so it took me a few minutes to get my bearings. Like in Chicago, it felt like it was a little bit easier to get my bearings, but maybe it's just because I had seen a little bit more vlog footage from the year prior than I did this time. It's been a number of years. It's been about 6 years since the Nationals in Atlantic City, so it took a couple of minutes for that, and then started going to what I was calling the south part of the show, so a little bit past the corporate booths and getting closer to the autograph pavilion. My voice is already going, so we'll see how this goes. Ran into John Newman, Sports Card Nation, one of the people that I wanted to bump into. So we had a good chat, sat there for a while. Andy, she blinded me with refractors. You might have seen some of his content as well. So the three of us were chatting. There were some other friends who popped in and out while we were chatting, so it was good to see them. And again, getting in early, before really even VIP, it's nice because you feel a little bit less pressure. You feel a little bit more, calm and relaxed, so you can sit down and have some conversations and not feel as pressured to be like, hey, great to see you, but we're gonna go. So really take some time to sit down and chat if you have the time. Some people are only there for a day or two. Feels a little bit more hectic and chaotic if you're trying to, be on a time crunch. So after that, continued on to the southern part of the show, as I was calling it, and went to go see one of the booths that I had, formed a pretty good relationship with in Chicago. We did a number of deals. They bought a bunch of cards off of me. I bought a bunch of cards off of them, some trades, some cash, all that kind of stuff. So wanted to check in there first, and coincidentally, they happened to be all the way in the far corner, all the way down by the autograph pavilion, which actually worked out really well for negotiating my way all the way down there. So once I figured out which wall I was looking at, I went all the way down there, and I just kind of started serpentining the aisles, taking a look, seeing what I could see that might have some interest for me and my PC. So basically, my philosophy is whenever I go, I'm looking for obviously 90s basketball cards. If I see anybody that has 90s, even if it's football, I'm going to stop and take a little bit of a peek and then see if they have basketball. If I see that they have basketball, if it's just football centric, I'm probably going to keep moving. If there's a nice Brett Favre, I might take a couple minutes and kind of kick the tires on that. But if I see some basketball, I'm going to see if they have some Penny. If I don't see Penny, I always ask. If I see Jordan and Kobe, I'm asking. If I see Shaq and KG and Iverson, I'm absolutely asking, even if I have to wait a while. And there are some times that they were busy and I would have to wait a while. That's okay. It always pays to ask. You never know what's sitting behind the booth. There were a couple of times last year that was a huge benefit to me for asking, because I found some cards that were great. This year, the same thing happened a couple of times. Not every time. Obviously, the success rate's going to vary, but it always benefits you to ask, because you never know what's sitting behind a dealer's booth. They might have nothing, but they might have that exact card that you're looking for. So at that point, at that first booth that I was looking at, I did find a couple of kind of lower end, lower grade Brett Favres that were nice 90s cards. One of them being the Christmas ornament. I've talked about those before. I've gotten some on ComC. So that Brett Favre Christmas ornament in an SGC slab, so it's fun to have one that's raw. Maybe I'll put on the Christmas tree this next year. We'll see. And then one that's protected. Didn't really care about the grade. Those things were always in bad shape. And they also had an Allen Iverson that I was interested in because it was an SGC 1. I just thought that was kind of neat and cool. I couldn't see any reason why it was a 1. I'm not going to crack it out and say to resub it. I just think it's kind of a neat thing to have as a 1. It was like $10 or $20. And in fact, we actually did a trade. They wanted some of the Kobe's that I had brought with me. So we made a trade, so there's no cash exchange at that point. So we're all happy. From there, I then went on. I found another booth that had a lot of 90s basketball. I asked him about pennies. He said, yeah, we've definitely got some. They had some bargain bins with both slabs and raw cards. So he and I, because it was early on Wednesday, were going through, and he was saying it was actually helpful for him to have me come through because he was able to actually sort through some of the stuff that he had been meaning to, but was kind of, a little bit behind on sorting through. So we were sorting through those together. As he found pennies, he would pull them out. So I grabbed a couple lower end things, a couple of slab cards that he was charging less than it even cost the slab cards for PSA now even. So right now it's $18. He was even below that. A lot of stuff that he had gotten back. He was hoping, just throwing a bunch of stuff out there, seeing what could get 10s, and anything that wasn't in a 10, he would just kind of blow out and get rid of it for like $10 or so. So he found a number of cards, found some raw cards as well that were just kind of neat. He was telling me he was going to really work with me, give me a really good deal. Once it came down to negotiating, he wasn't really as flexible because he was thinking I was going to buy a whole ton, and it was a lot of, common cards and stuff like that. So I grabbed a couple of Steph Curry's for my wife and this and that, for a buck here, a buck there. But he wasn't as flexible on the price as he originally was advertising. But at that point, we had been going through the bins for so long, I felt as though I kind of almost owed it to him. So I didn't end up going back to that dealer because I didn't feel as though his prices were that great. It was fun going through the bins. I always like going through his bargain bins, but usually people are pretty willing to negotiate on that. So, threw him a bone, and then kept it moving. So then kept going through that southern part of the show, if you will, and stumbled upon Justin's 610 Sports Cards, his booth, with some of the friends, Spur Fantic, I think that's how you say his name, but John Burleson, A. Harmon, Andy, and I can't remember the other person that was set up with him. But anyway, so Andy had the penny that I had kind of on my short list. It wasn't on the top 10 list I put together. I did pick up 3 of my top 10. I probably should have said that at the beginning. But anyway, so this was on the short list that just barely missed that cut. But he had sitting in his booth the penny 500 volts in an SGC 8.5. Probably would prefer it in a different slab than SGC, but the card is what really matters, and the 8.5 doesn't bother me by any means. So, so we started talking, we started negotiating. I don't remember if we made a trade. I think we did. We did make a trade now that I'm thinking about it. So he ended up taking my Intense Jordan, which was a PSA 10, which I had picked up earlier in the year, and we added some cash to the deal to make it even for both of us. So we both felt good with that. I'm not sure if that Jordan's PC or if he flipped it or whatnot. Doesn't really make a big difference to me because I got a PC item that I've been looking for, and I'm extraordinarily happy. So at this point, it's Wednesday. The show hasn't even officially opened, and I feel more than satisfied having picked up an absolute grail for my own PC. So very happy with that. And now I'm just saying, hey, anything else is a cherry on top. And just being at National, I think everything card related is just cherry on top. But so continuing to go around, I found a booth that actually had some 90s packs, some lower end wax that wasn't very expensive, but I found some packs of 95, 96 Skybox, which I'm planning to do a video at some point in the next year. So good to get a few more packs of that. Only $3 a pack for those, which is very cheap. There's not a ton of great stuff, but you can get the meltdowns in there, which again, the Jordan is very expensive, and we'll talk more about that in that video. He also had 2000 Topps Gold Label Baseball. And I love Gold Label. Gold Label is a fun product to rip. So I was very happy to grab some of those. I can't remember exactly how many, but again, $3 a pack. So I let Joe know I have some packs for us to rip when we're in the hotel at some point during the week. It's always fun for me and Joe to have some fun packs to rip in the hotel room, and you never know what you might find in there. Might be a really great card to bring back to the show and move, or is it just something that might be in addition to your PC. So we always have fun. So then Joe was back in Atlantic City at that point, and we went and got dinner and went back to the hotel room, rested for a little bit, and then I was invited to go to the Cards and Cocktails party at the Hard Rock. Went there, had a fantastic time, met so many friends either that I had met before, some friends that I met for the first time. It was an interesting venue because I guess they had shut down the club and now it's only open for special events. So it was open for us on that evening, obviously being a special event. And inside the club area, they were playing some music a little bit louder than my old ears like at this point. So it was hard to talk, but apparently there was a balcony area. That's where most people were. So once myself and some other people that were inside realized that, we went outside, and that's really where all the fun was happening. We were told that there were a few players, so they had Run TMC, if you remember the 3 of those guys from Golden State: Chris Mullen, Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, Jordan were all there. Lawrence Taylor was there, and one of the Gronk brothers, and there might have been a few other players. So, you know, fun. There were a lot of people that were taking pictures, asking for autographs and stuff. That's not really my speed. I enjoy having the conversations, whether it's with, you know, friends or, you know, people like that. So, you know, there's no pictures. You might see some pictures. I think some people were there taking pictures that I might be showing up in online. We'll see. Who knows? But really fun time. And then as we were leaving, they had some goodie bags. You'll see some of those. That really, one of the things that really stood out to me was they had a stand for graded cards and whatnot that I'll definitely be using in videos coming up soon. So that was Wednesday. At that point, grabbed an Uber from the Hard Rock, went back to the hotel, tried to get a few hours of sleep before Thursday kicked off. All right, so that brings us to Thursday. So Thursday morning, Joe and I got up. We're going to go to the show together at that point. We wanted to go get some coffee first. You know, at this point, I've been there for 2 days, and Wednesday was a packed day for both of us and a late night for me. So we went and got some Dunkin' Donuts and then grabbed an Uber from Dunkin' Donuts to get up to the convention center. As we got into the Uber driver saw where we were going and laughed. Not always a great sign. So we asked him, you know, how his day was going and had some small talk. And then he said, well, fellas, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. The good news is happy to take you wherever you want to go. The bad news is we're not getting where you want to go. So we started asking some questions. What do you mean? And he told us the traffic was an absolute mess. Because of all of the demand for Ubers, he was being paid extra to drive around. And he said even the extra money he's getting paid isn't worth all the hassle. And he was ready to call it quits and go to the golf course. That's what he was telling us. So he started explaining to us that, you know, the traffic was so backed up, he could probably get us about 2 blocks away from the venue. And that would probably be the best for us to just get out and walk at that point. He'd already done that with a couple other people. So again, he said, you know, it's your choice. I'm more than happy to let you guys sit here in the air conditioning as long as you want. And sure enough, we got about 2 blocks away. We're at a red light. It goes green, goes back to red. We haven't moved. Goes green again, back to red. We haven't moved. And at that point, Joe and I said, forget about it. We'll just get out. So we got out, appreciated his kind gesture of letting us stay in as long as we wanted. And we walked 2 blocks to the show. Once we got closer to see what was really causing the backup, it was obvious, first of all, there's just not a lot of area for traffic to move around. So that was part of it. But a lot of it also was the public parking at the convention center was full. And this was around 9 a.m. that we started getting there. So this is probably, you know, 9:15 now that we're getting closer. Already full, and because it was full and they didn't manage it very well, there were people just sitting there in their cars waiting because there really wasn't anywhere. It's just gridlock at that point. So eventually they cleared that up. It took hours for them to clear up. So the traffic was an absolute disaster, and it stayed very, very heavy throughout the week when you were Ubering. They cleaned that up a little bit more because at that point the police knew that they had to get involved to help direct traffic and manage the flow a little bit better to make sure that there weren't any issues if there were any need for emergency vehicles. So you know, one of the many things that you'll hear about in the next city was the traffic was horrendous. They just did not have the capacity for all the demand. So a lot of people ended up walking a lot further, which took a toll on people's feet and back and legs and all that kind of stuff. So again, you've probably heard plenty of people talk about that already, but you know, wanted to make sure to talk about that. So at that point, I went back and checked some of the booths that I knew had 90s from the day before, checked in to see if they had any new inventory. Once going through there, I continued on. Suze, who was on the channel talking about the National and the preview, had given me the tip-off that the Jordan Dynasty collection was at the CSG booth. So I went over there to take a look. My brother was very excited for me to send him video of that. I took some video, and just an absolute incredible collection. If you don't know about the collection, what it is are the shoes that Jordan wore in the finishing game, the clinching game of each of his 6 championships. So the shoes that he had on in the last game of each championship, in some cases they were autographed. I'm not sure if all of them were autographed by Jordan, but I think most of them were. Just an incredible collection, and something that I was very excited to see. You know, seeing pictures of it is one thing, seeing it in person is a whole other thing. So hopefully the video helps you get a little bit closer, but again, seeing them in person is very incredible. Just seeing all the wear and tear that Jordan put on the shoes, and you know, Jordan by all accounts wore a new pair of shoes each game. So to see all of the abuse that those shoes take in just one game of use, just really says a lot about how hard of a player he was, to play against, because he was putting his shoes through a lot of work. You can only imagine what he was putting his defenders against, that he went up against. So at that point, I had seen most of the southern part of the show. Again, this is Thursday, so Wednesday I'd hit most of the southern part of the show. That's what I'm going to call it for just ease of use. So then after getting through the CSG booth, I kind of, scanned the corporate area. I really don't spend much time in the corporate area, but the stuff that was on either side of the corporate booths, I hit those, and then I started working on what I'm calling the northern part of the show. So that's really past the corporate booths and going towards the Breaker Pavilion. So I started serpentining through those aisles, and then, my eyes found at one of the booths that I had marked, so good thing that I'd marked this booth off to make sure I go and check early on. I found a penny that I knew I needed for my collection. Again, a little bit further down on my priority list than the 500 volts, but still in that short list of high-end pennies that I've been looking for a very long time. Missed one on eBay that went, it was bin OBO, somebody sent in an offer. I think it went for about $400. So we're talking about the Triumvirate Illuminator. I saw that sitting in the case in a BGS 9.5. The price that they had on it looked like it was very competitive compared to where the last comp was. Honestly, I felt as though if I didn't act fast, it would probably be gone if I sat around. So asked him, if there was any chance that he'd be looking into trade. He said, sure, not a problem. Started going through my box of stuff that I brought, and pulled out my PSA 10 Jordan Black Label, which, if you remember, that's the one that I had cracked out of a CSG 7.5. So, not a lot of money into that. And then he also pulled out my Kobe Bryant 96 Bowman's Best Rookie, base rookie, in a PSA 10, which is something that I'd had since I was a kid and sent off for bulk grading and got it back, relatively recently. I can't remember exactly when I got it back. So he wanted those two cards. He wanted me to add some cash to the deal. I wasn't really comfortable with that. Eventually negotiated, and we settled on just those two cards for the penny. So I was very, very happy with that. Again, his valuation on it was already, I think, pretty competitive, but I was able to get him down a little bit more to make it just a straight trade. And two cards I don't have much of anything into, so that always feels a little bit better to get PC for cards that you don't have much into. So that was a great win for me in my PC. Again, now I've got two cards that are on the short list of Grail penny cards, and I've gotten them in trade, which is the way I like to operate a national if I can, but that's not always the way that things work out. So I'm already, winning in a big sense in my estimation. Very excited for that. Then fast forward, trade night. So this Thursday night, trade night, I left the show a little bit early. Last year, I had tried going to trade night after going and getting some pizza when we were in Chicago. Kyle from Wax Museum had said, it really makes sense to get to trade night early, so that way you can get a table and kind of lay some of your cards out, and then people kind of walk through almost like it's a show and you're set up like a dealer. So this year, I decided to follow that advice, even though Kyle wasn't there, and left the show a little bit early with a couple of friends, and we went to go line up, and the line was already ridiculously long. So this year Ryan had a spot in the same convention center in one of the halls further down the hall, and again, it was further down the hall, and the line was all the way back to the entrance of the National, which, if you're not there, probably doesn't have a lot of context, but you might have seen pictures. It was ridiculous. I mean, I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of details, but it was a mob scene. And when I left the show, so the show closes at 6, I left at about 5:15. This trade night opens at 6:30. So I left an hour or more before the trade night opened, and the line was already ridiculously long. So stood there, waited with some people that I knew. We were kind of chopping it up, chatting and saying, do we really want to wait around to get in here? We all decided we would wait and see what happens, but we didn't have high expectations, even though we knew that there was going to be a lot of space compared to prior years. We weren't expecting a whole lot. And once we got in, sure enough, there was a ton of space. It was packed, but we were able to get in. They did have to stop people because the fire marshal and the laws there for their capacity, but we were able to get in. I wasn't expecting to stay very long, just kind of started walking around with a couple people. ran into Kiki and Ivan from Germany. You might remember them as the Croatian twins. Kiki has been on when we were talking about some of the PWC auctions way back a long time ago on the channel. But you've probably seen Kiki also on Instagram and other channels, Cardboard Chronicles and others. So, talking to him, talking to some other collectors, and we were just looking. I mean, Kiki's collection is absolutely unbelievable. He was showing us just, absolutely amazing grails that he had brought with us, and I mean that's just the tip of the iceberg for his collection. So just incredible stuff. And Kiki is a fun guy, so Kiki, if you're watching, really appreciate it, and had a lot of fun sitting there chatting with you and your friends and your brother that came. So eventually they asked me, well, we're showing cards, Jake, what did you bring? So I pull out my box of stuff that I had available for trade, and his brother Ivan, unbeknownst to me, this was his first national. He had never been before, and he was interested in 2 of my cards. So he wanted my PSA 9 Kevin Garnett Finest Rookie with the peel on. He, like I, like having the peel on the finest, as a lot of 90s collectors do. He also wanted my Penny PSA 9 Electrifying. So I have 2 copies of that I've graded recently, as well as an SGC 9. So I brought one of them that I made available. So he was interested in those, gave me his trade box, and asked me to take a look through and see what I liked, and settled on trading those 2 cards for a PSA 8 Jordan Warp Speed. So really cool card, love those, a lot of hollow foil, something that I also made available for trade or sale in my box, but I ended up coming home with it, which I'm very happy with. Something that I don't need in my collection, but very happy to have in my collection. So that was a lot of fun. I didn't stay too much longer. At that point, already getting tired. I didn't expect to stay for very long at all. Stayed longer than I was expecting. Happy I did, and then kind of looped around, caught a couple other people, said bye, asked them how their night was going, and went back to the hotel room. And I don't even remember what time it was. It was pretty late at that point. Grabbed a little bit of food on the way. I think I grabbed some McDonald's and just ate that in the hotel room and got some sleep after that. So then Friday came around, and Joe and I knew if we wanted to get in there before the show opened, we had to get there well before the show opened. So, we talked about it, and Joe said, go ahead, I'll get there when I've got enough rest. So I left, and I got to the show at about 8:10, 8:15 or so. Went to get in and saw a lot of people hanging out in the hallway, which I was kind of surprised being that early. A lot of dealers were hanging out there, and I started asking. They said, oh, they won't let us in until 8:30. Which blew me away. In Chicago, the dealers could get in pretty much as early as the venue was open. So I was surprised by that. We all just hung around in the lobby, waited until 8:30, but I knew if the dealers aren't going to get in until 8:30, and I'm trying to go around and look at what the dealers have and talk to people, they're going to be setting up still. So I went downstairs, by the little coffee shop area, asked them, I was trying to get some orange juice or some water or something, and that wasn't even open. So I just sat in one of the chairs and, caught up with my wife and kids, and then talked to my brother, which was actually a lot of fun because that's right near the entrance of the venue. So as people were filtering in, I got to say hi, good morning, and chat with some people that I otherwise might not have seen. So, some people like Jeff, who's now with Panini, and Tracy Hackler's old position. Great to chat with him. Saw Dr. Beckett. Great to talk to him. John Newman was there again. And again, there's tons of other people that I'm forgetting. But it was great to see them as they're coming in the morning and see how their night was going, see what they had planned for the day. And again, seeing people at the National, you're always going to miss certain people. It's really, there's not a lot of time. There's a lot you're trying to cram in. Unless you plan it or run into them by chance, there's a good chance you're going to miss people. I did last year. I did again this year. I'm sure I will the next time I go. It's just part of the way that the National goes. So now it's around 9 o'clock. I start filtering into the venue Friday morning again. And again, check in with my favorite 90s booths and any booths that I saw stuff at the day before. Sometimes there were cards that I saw because the Wi-Fi was not great. Most of the time, if I wasn't sure on a comp, I couldn't get Wi-Fi, I would go check it the night later if I felt as though it would be there. Again, stuff like the 500 volts and the Triumvirate, I know the values of those. I've been looking at them for a long time, but I also didn't want to wait because I didn't feel comfortable or confident that they would be there if I did wait. So other stuff that I thought might be there, sometimes I'd check. And sure enough, there was one of the cards that was like that I went back over to the booth as I was making some of my rounds for some of those 90s vendors, and took a look at that card and decided to make a move on that. I'm trying to remember if I made a trade for that. I can't remember what the deal was on that card. But anyway, it was the Fleer Ultra Starring Rolls penny in a PSA 9. So, you know, made a deal for that, whether it was trade or cash, I can't recall. Very happy to pick that up. It's one that I have raw in my raw in my collection. I've had it for a number of years. But a PSA 9 is nice to have as well. So I'll probably take the raw one, compare it to the PSA 9 as I like to do, and decide if it makes sense to grade the one I currently have. And then I can make a decision if I want to grade it. And once I do, if I've graded it, see which copy I want to keep in my collection and which I want to move on to another collector perhaps. So that was fun, and then continued on to some more of the 90s dealers, and I found a card that I again hadn't seen the day before, but I knew I definitely wanted. So the card that I saw was actually one that I had seen and been introduced to by Kyle Wax Museum, who had gotten Playmakers Theater Barry Sanders in a lot that he had picked up. You know, and we talked about it, compared it to the basketball one, and so on and so forth. I saw the Brett Favre sitting in a friend's booth. So Grant Slayton, Waldorf Stories, you may know him. Incredible 90s collector, incredible cards. But knowing that he's from the Wisconsin area, I know Brett Favre is one of those guys that's in high demand in his area, and you know, he's not really trying to get rid of those if he doesn't have to. So saw that card, knew I really wanted it, but knew there might be a chance that I'm not going to come home with that card. So talking to him, asking him if he'd be interested in doing a trade or whatnot, he said, you know, it can't hurt to look. So I started looking through my stuff, you know, cool stuff, but nothing I'm really interested in. And I was texting my buddy Joe, who's on the other side of the venue, told him the card that I saw. And he was very excited for me. He said, wow, you've got to get that. What's that worth? You know, so we started talking through text, which again, the service wasn't great. So being able to chat through text with him was a rare occurrence, and coincidentally happened to be happening at this time. And I said to him, well, I really hope that the dealer that I'm working with here, you know, Joe doesn't know Grant very well, so I'm not going to, you know, drop a name that he doesn't know. But I said, I hope the dealer is interested in my Michael Jordan New Heights PSA 10. And sure enough, Grant pulled that one card out and said, you know, there's not a lot in here that I'm interested in right now except for this card. So at that point, I'm like, well, all the stars are aligning, so this deal is going to happen. So Grant and I agreed to evaluation on the two cards and made the trade. Very excited to get that Brett Favre in my collection. It is a beautiful card. I'm still going to get the penny at some point. But, you know, it's one of those things that those football cards, those football Playmakers Theaters, especially in a lot of the 90s inserts of football, haven't started getting some of the love in the hobby. You know, football kind of lags behind basketball, so it's one that I'm glad to have jumped on and make a trade for. You know, a card that I had actually gotten in another trade. There's a lot of stuff like that that's been happening over the last few years. Cards that I trade for, that I then grade, and then I'm able to trade for other cards I want in my collection. You know, is really helping me level up into some of those cards that I've always wanted. So really happy with that. So as I'm walking around, I see some other cards, and in this point, it starts getting a little fuzzy for me. What stuff happened on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday? Some of the stuff just happened in such fast succession. You know, it's really hard to remember. So I think, though, later on, I had started seeing some other 90s stuff that I hadn't seen in the prior days, and started asking those dealers again if they had any pennies sitting behind the case. In this case, the dealer said yes, that he did have some pennies sitting behind the case, and in fact, he had the 96 credentials of penny, which is a card that I had offered to me in a trade in Chicago, and I had actually exchanged it out for a different penny card, and ever since then I've been kind of kicking myself and saying, geez, I wish I had kept that credential in. You know, I wanted both cards really, but I had chosen to take the credential out and put a different card in. I'm like, geez, I really wish I had not made that choice, you know, or I could have gotten both, or, you know, figured something out. So I've been trying very desperately to find one. You know, so as you may have heard, SGC was offering their version of raw card reviews at this show. So this was in their raw card review holder, deemed inauthentic. So I was poring over this card, trying to see what I could find in this card, why it wasn't given a numeric grade, why it was deemed authentic, and all that kind of stuff. I think it might be a min size thing. You know, we know the cuts and stuff on those with being diamond cut. You know, Kyle and I have talked about those in episodes, as well as a lot of other 90s collectors. You know, we've talked about those issues with those 96 credentials. You know, so having it even authenticated is important for those cards, but not sure what I want to do with that. If I want to send it into SGC to put in an authentic slab, or if I want to send it off to PSA and hope it gets put in an authentic slab, I haven't really decided. So that's a question that if you're still watching, you can drop me your thoughts on that credential. What should I do with that? Should I, you know, I would like it slabbed, but don't really want to have to wait for BGS. You know, we'll talk a little bit more about BGS towards the end, as well as SGC. But I also don't want it in a BGS authentic slab, so you know, I'm a little bit torn as to what to do with that card. But anyway, so, you know, asked him what he was looking for. So he told me point blank what he had into it. I asked him if he'd take $50 over what he had into it. You know, I had made some deals and made some other sales, so I had that. You know, it was essentially a trade for me at that point because I had sold some other cards. So he said, sure, you know, he had just gotten it in. That's why it wasn't out in his booth. And he was happy to make, you know, a quick $50 off of that. So made both of us very happy. And that was definitely below comps. You know, this is something I try to do, try to focus on keeping things below comps, you know, wherever they are when I can. So then I moved on to another booth that I saw a ton of 90s PMGs, both football and basketball. I was talking to the dealer for a while. You know, he had some great 90s stuff, but it seems as though from what he was saying, he wasn't having a great show. Not a lot of stuff was moving. At the same time, another collector rolled up to that table who was an Iverson and Vince Carter collector. So, you know, we both have quite a bit in common. So we started chatting, somebody who's actually familiar with the channel, which is always fun to find somebody that is interested in some similar players to me and that watches. That's obviously a well-informed 90s collector at that point. So we started talking, and he asked me what I had for Iverson, and I unfortunately haven't gone through my Iverson duplicates, which I need to do desperately. But he asked me if I had any Vince Carter, which I did. I told him I had the first day issue refractor, which was in a PSA 9. You might have seen in a recent video. So he said he was definitely interested in that. So we rolled off to the side, found a spot really just outside the corporate pavilion, and started pulling out the cards that we had and started talking through. So we agreed to a deal. So he got that Vince Carter, you know, which is a great PC item for any Vince Carter collector. There's, you know, just one PSA 9 and only one PSA 10. So I know where the PSA 10 is, and now I also know where the PSA 9 is. It's not with me anymore, which I'm fine with because I have the penny. But I got a few cards for my collection. The card that really started the whole deal is he showed me a Best Shot Atomic Refractor of Penny and a PSA 10. Usually that's a card that, since I have a couple copies raw, not really excited to get another one in my collection, whether or not it's graded. But looking at that, the color usually is faded on those, especially on the back. This is full bleed color. The color is magnificent on this card. It really is stunning visually. So at that point, I'm like, you know what? I do want that in my collection. I do want to make a trade for that. So obviously those two cards are not the same, even close to the same in value. So he threw in a couple other Iversons. So you might be familiar with the Planet Metal from 97, the Reebok Gold, which are very hard to find. He had that in a PSA 9. We put that in the deal. He had a 97 Bowman's Best Performers subset card, beautiful rainbow card in an Atomic Refractor in a PSA 8. We put that in the deal. And then the fourth card, I believe, was another Iverson. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I will show it. You know, so we agreed to the valuation of those cards. Coincidentally, at this point, we were both able to actually get a little bit of Wi-Fi service. So we were both comfortable sitting there waiting, figuring out the values, you know, while we could slowly chug through our Wi-Fi coverage to make sure that this deal happened. But as we were doing that, we were talking 90s and talking about a whole bunch of stuff. So it was a lot of fun. You know, it was a little bit of both trading and just, you know, sitting there chatting. So again, a lot of fun having done that. And, you know, really soon after getting that penny credentials. Actually, the way that the penny credentials had happened, let me strike that and reverse it. I had seen that card, and I had been a little bit, you know, cautious. I wanted to go and check comps, and I had checked the comps while we were doing the trade. So as I was doing the trade, I had also talked to Joe, and I needed to consult with him and get his thoughts on it, and he said absolutely go ahead and get that credential. So then we went back, and I put down a rough estimate of where the booth was. I didn't have the exact booth number. Went up to the booth, and I asked a couple of people, and I said, oh, do you have, you know, any pennies back there? Because I knew the person had put it behind their booth. You know, the first person I saw said no. The second person And I went up to him and he said, yes, and you just looked at it. And I said, that's the guy I'm looking for. So at that point, we made the deal. So sorry. Again, this is all trying to put this all together is a fun thing. So then we were kind of filtering through, and there was a guy in Chicago that was in the back corner that Joe and I found on day one on Wednesday that had some great bargain bins that we had a lot of fun going through. Found a lot of great cards that we were tried to find on the map, trying to look for as we got there. We could not find him for the life of us, and we were both saying, well, maybe he didn't come up this year. But I had just run into him at the Springfield show, and I knew he said that he was coming, so we said, well, maybe things happened, who knows. Well, Friday we ran into him, and we're very happy to do so. So sat down at his table towards the end of the show, went through some of his bargain bins, found one penny I was going to grab, and got that card, asked him for his booth number so Joe and I could go there and start our day on Saturday at his booth, which is exactly what we did. So that brings us to Saturday. Well, before we get there, Friday, Joe and I had dinner reservations for Ruth Chris. Great dinner, a lot of fun for him to kind of have a little bit more of a laid-back dinner, and then head back to the room and get a little bit of sleep. So that's what we did to finish out our Friday. So Saturday, really the last full day at the show, but also a very busy day. Friday and Saturday tend to be the busiest days at the show, so we know we've got to get some of those moves done before the masses come in, Wednesday and Thursday or Tuesday if you can get in as a dealer. And then by Friday and Saturday, you've also got to contend with the masses when it comes to foot traffic. So at that point, I knew I wanted to get in there pretty early. Got in there early. Joe and I both got in there together and started in with those bargain bins that we talked about, that we finished out Friday with. Went through those. So I went through those a little bit, and I had a meetup planned with a deal that had already been put in place. Had to meet up with a person to finalize the deal and exchange the cards. So I went to that meetup place after I was done with the bargain bins. Joe stayed at the bargain bins, and got to the meetup place because the Wi-Fi was terrible. You had to plan those out in advance, but the guy had not gotten there yet. So I hung out there for a little bit. We planned to meet at the card ladder booth, which is, was a very convenient place to meet up for trees because it was right outside of the breaker pavilion where there were a couple of whatnot booths that were set up, and it was kind of a nice spot that really not a lot of people were, so it gave you a little bit of like a countertop that you could lay your stuff out if nobody else was using it, which was nice. So planned to meet there. He wasn't there. At that point, I was chatting with the folks at the card ladder booth, and ironically, I haven't talked about this yet, but there was the number 2 card on my top 10 penny list I had found at the show on Wednesday. I saw it, I took a look at it, talked to the dealer. I said, hey, do you mind holding that off to the side for me? Because the valuation that they had on it I thought was fair, but I had to move a different card which somebody else had offered. I made a good offer on, but I had to get the cash from them. They said, I got to make some moves to get the cash. So I knew I was going to make that deal happen. And once I made that deal happen, then I had the cash to go and get the penny, which was basically a 1-for-1 trade for me. It just had to happen through a couple of sets of hands. So I asked them if they would hold it off for me, and they said, well, how long until you're going to be back? And I said, well, I don't know, maybe the end of the day. That was on Wednesday. And they said, I'm not really too keen on holding it for that long. So, I said, okay, well, we'll take our chances and see what happens. I know it's a niche card, but they had 2 cards from that set in their showcase. So I said, well, do you mind putting the penny on the bottom of the 2 cards? Which they did, but sometimes people would come by and want to look at the penny. So sometimes I would, just kind of glance over there, see if it was still there. Sometimes it was on the top of the pile. Sometimes it was on the bottom. So nervous. Again, we're talking about Saturday at this point that I had seen it on Wednesday. I'm getting very nervous because this person, with the card that we had agreed to a valuation on was saying, well, I'm still waiting on this deal. I'm still waiting on this. I'm still waiting on this. I checked in multiple times. Again, he had agreed to the price, so I was happy with the price. He was happy with the card. He just had to get the cash, and then we could exchange it, and then I could go and get my card with the cash. So waiting patiently, trying to anyway. So talking to Josh at Card Ladder, and he said, just go get the card. I said, well, I need to make the deal first. So he said, well, and again, this is something that is a very kind gesture, not something that I expected, but I am forever indebted to him and grateful for him doing this. He said, here, I know you're going to make that deal happen, so here's the cash. Go get the card so it doesn't go anywhere, and then make the deal, and you can give it back to me when you make that other deal. So I said, are you sure? We talked about it for a while, and he said, not even a question. You need that card. Go and get it. All right, so here I go. I've got the cash. I know the deal I'm going to be making, so I run over there and I negotiate with the dealer. You know, I'm trying to get it for as little as possible, obviously, and agree to a deal for the Penny Ultra Stars Gold and a BGS 9. Now, just like the Triumvirate that we already talked about, this BGS did not have any subgrades, which is something I am not a fan of. Whereas with the Triumvirate, I asked the dealer why it didn't have subgrades, and he said that's just the way he got it. He got it in a trade, or you know, whatever the case might be. This dealer actually submitted it to BGS and said, well, I think that the big grade is the only one that matters, so why am I going to give BGS any extra money to put the subgrades on if they don't matter? I think most of us know, I think probably all of us know, the subgrades absolutely do matter on BGS cards. If you're looking at a BGS 9.5, if you're looking at a True Gem Plus, you know, so all 9.5s and 110, as opposed to a Min Gem, so all 9.5s and 1.9, those two cards are going to sell for wildly different prices on the whole for most cards. Just like with a BGS 9, if you have something that is on the lower end of the subgrades versus something that is 0.5 away from a gem, the 0.5 away from a gem is going to sell for more than something that is at the low end of the BGS 9 spectrum. So those are two cards. Again, just like that Credential and the SGC Authentic, I would love your opinions down in the comments. What should I do with those two cards? Should I submit them to PSA, crack them out and sub them? Should I send them off to BGS in their slabs and just get them with the subgrades? Should I send them to SGC? I think that's probably lowest on my priority list for those PC cards, but I also don't really want to wait for the BGS. And also, like we'll talk about towards the end, I really don't want to send it to BGS and get them in those new slabs that they are projecting might be coming soon. Not sure exactly when. There's not a whole lot of really concrete information about that. So I would love your help making that decision down in the comments, because I'm really torn on what to do with those. I love both the cards as they are, but you know, the BGS slabs without the subgrades definitely aren't my favorite things in the world. So they're safe in there for now, but they're not going to be in there for long, I imagine. So you know, very happy to get that. Again, very grateful to Josh for that very kind, friendly gesture. And then Brian Wells, the person that I was waiting to meet up with at the card ladder booth, got there. He had a very busy week trying to run around with stuff for other members of Ship My Cards. So the trade that we had already agreed to, we finalized that, and then we started looking through the other stuff that we each had brought with us to see if there's any other deals that we want to make. And I had brought the first day issue Topps Chrome, not the Refractor, but the one that I had just very recently got back in a PSA 8. I also have the PSA 10, which is staying in my collection. So those are the only two graded by PSA right now. He wanted the 8, and he had another card that was on my top 10 list. So this is the third card on my top 10 list I was able to secure. So he had the 98.99 Skybox Molten Metal Fusion Titanium Penny Raw that we were able to come to an agreement on for those two cards to swap, which again, very excited to do that and get another one knocked off my top 10 list. So now, again, I've got 3 cards knocked off my top 10 list and 3 cards knocked off the list that's just below the top 10. So that was my Saturday. Again, everything on Wednesday would have been enough to make me more than satisfied card-wise, but every day seemed to be bringing new highs and highlights for my PC hunts, and I couldn't be happier. So, Sunday, the last day in Atlantic City, Joe and I got up, packed up our stuff. We had to check out of the hotel, load up the car. So it was a busy morning before we even hit the show floor. So we did all of that, got the stuff in the car, went and parked in one of the public spots, not in the garage for the convention center. No, not doing that mess. So we got there, walked, and went around, you know, again, to some of those favorite booths. Really, at this point, to see any last-minute stuff, most of the stuff, you know, we already knew it was there, and, you know, really wanted to say bye to folks before we left. So, for me, there was a lot of folks I wanted to say bye to, but tried to make it as quick as possible, you know, and, again, keeping an eye out as we went around. So, at that point, you know, going over, I saw another card that Andy Harmon had picked up that I was interested in, and this was a Cormageddon 0304 Essential Credential, which is a card that I've eyed on eBay a couple of times in the last few months, so I knew, without a shadow of a doubt what that was worth, which again is something we'll talk about later on. So came to a very quick deal on that. It's not a very high value card, but something I definitely want in my collection, so happy to have gotten that. So said bye to him, and Justin continued on saying bye to folks, and then knew that Brian Wells was set up, so wanted to go over and say bye to him and his wife, and ran into Chris Gio, who you might know from Facebook, great 90s collector, really fun running into him, and he had a penny frequent flyers that I've got a PSA 10 of, he had a PSA 9 of, so I was trying to see if we could work out some sort of a deal. If he was interested in my 10, I'd take the downgrade into a 9 and extract some cash out of the 10, and he said no, but let's make a deal on the 9. So we did that. I'm very happy to get that. So again, that 10 is definitely something that when somebody's interested in it, happy to move that, because I have the 9. I was a little bit more hesitant to move it when I didn't have the 9, but now that I have the 9, happy to keep the 9 and move the 10 when the time is right. So not in a rush, but it'll happen eventually, I'm sure. So then also looked at some of the stuff that Brian Wells had. He had a number of pennies out there, so we were chatting, and I said, there's a few cards in this booth that you're low on, and he said, that's fine, I understand, thank you for letting me know. So we talked about those cards, and he said those are cards that I don't have a lot into. I just want to move some stuff and get some cash. So we agreed to deals on those, because those were both, all three of those cards are ones that I have in copies that I'd like to get better condition copies. So I got 2 copies of the Fleer Superstar Ultra Abilities Superstar die cuts. Gorgeous die cuts, very, very delicate cards, very intricate die cuts. So very happy to get one of the 2 more of those, and compare those with the copy that I have that I had negligently not sent out to BGS. I had a raw card reviewed. It came back as a BGS 8.5, I believe, or a BGS 9, and I said no, I'm going to wait to send that out, and still haven't done that. So anyway, so I have those 2 to compare it to now and see how they all stack up against one another, and eventually, again, we'll send those out. Now I've got to figure out what I want to do with them. Anyway, so the other one was the 97 SPX Promotion. Again, a card that I absolutely love. That the one that I have is a little bit faded. The color on Brian's looked great. And again, it was about half of comps. So happy to get that. Say bye to him and his wife. And at that point, Joe and I packed up our stuff, and we set out. Took the long drive back home, both of us exhausted. I think we stopped 3 times for coffee on the way. I'm still drinking coffee, trying to keep my energy going before I can catch up on sleep over the next few days. So, long trip, great trip, absolutely, blown away by some of the cards I was able to add to my collection. Again, exceeded any expectation I could have ever had for the show. If I had gotten any one of those top 7 cards that I picked up, I would have been more than happy. But, picking up, 7 new pennies for my PC that were all incredible cards, and more cards on top of that. Just incredible stuff. Can't say enough about that. Can't say enough about the people I ran into. Had some conversations. Lots of chats with Chris from Card Ladder. Chris, he was out for a couple days, but I was really happy to have been able to chat with him before he got sick. Christina, had a lot of great chats with her. And not sure where she ended the trip on her search for her one last maxi on the Rainbow, but hopefully she got some leads at least. If not, she found that, because I didn't get the chance to catch up with her on Sunday before I left. Ran into Josh. I had lots of great conversations with him. No, he picked up some great grails for his PC. Always happy to see that. Josh from Midwest Vintage, his buddy that he was set up with, John. Ran into Rob, the sports card therapist, when he was set up on Saturday. So many people that I ran into. Suze, ran into her on Sunday. Very happy to have run into her after she had told me about the CSG stuff as well. Again, there's just so many people. I know I'm forgetting people. There were just a ton of people at that party that I went to, which was a great time. So again, a lot of fun as always. Not sure if I'm going to be able to make it out to Chicago next year. We'll see. My wife already said no. But we'll see over time if that answer changes. She did say yes to Cleveland, though, so maybe it will become a every other year thing. We'll see how that goes. So some of the takeaways, wanted to share those with you. Some of the stuff you probably have already heard. I'll add my thoughts to it. Some of the stuff might be new takes that you haven't heard before. So first, the city of Atlantic City. A lot of people were saying how terrible it was, yada, yada, yada. We talked about traffic. My take is I talked to a lot of dealers, got their thoughts. How do you think this show was? What do you think about the city? More than one long-tenured dealer said if they come back here, we are not coming. You know, some of them would have to give up their spot. Some of them could get what they call a buyout. I don't know the details along that, but a lot of dealers said they did not want to come back for a number of reasons, just one of which being the difficulty to get to the location. So I had difficulties myself getting there. I can only imagine how it was for dealers as well. So that's one thing. The city in general was just not the easiest to navigate. Again, we talked about the traffic issues. There were some places to eat that were right across, but nothing like Gibson's. You know, the Ton Tavern was right across, and it was in the Sheraton. So, you know, that was okay, but, you know, there were a lot more options that were within very quick walking distances in Chicago. I can't speak on Cleveland. You know, I'd have to ask somebody that was there the last time they were there, I think in 2019. Be interested to hear their thoughts on Cleveland for some of these things, you know, but also it was one of those things that there is definitely nightlife, but some of the nightlife isn't the type that everybody wants to partake in. You know, some of the people were saying it's a great destination for families. I know I probably wouldn't bring my family. My family's not necessarily the biggest beach family, but also the boardwalk. You know, I've been to Atlantic City a number of years ago with a buddy just before he was getting married, and it is a different city even since then. I mean, that's less than 10 years ago, probably 5 to 7 years ago, and it was more fun. We felt a little bit better about our trip then than I would think if I was to go back under the same pretenses. So not the greatest area in my opinion. It's not the worst in the world, you know, coming from you know, the Northeast. There's a lot of cities like that I've been to, but you know, it's not the greatest, not something that I'd really be clamoring to go back to, and that's what I was hearing from a lot of dealers as well, and collectors. I know a number of collectors that I was sad weren't there this year, some of it for personal reasons, but a lot of it for travel reasons. So I know this is also a bad venue for a lot of West Coast people, a very far trip. So something in the middle of the country is probably a little bit better for everybody. My hotel. So a lot of stuff has been talked about the Claridge, some of it good, some of it not good, probably a lot of it not good. For me, it was adequate, I would say. So not something I'm going to be clamoring to go back to. I know a lot of the pictures and stuff online made it look a little bit more glamorous, something from like you know, the era of the 30s that I really enjoy, that, you know, period pieces from that time frame. But it definitely, you know, the pictures as typical you're going to find with hotels made it look a little bit better. My biggest gripe with the place is trying to create a video. The lighting in the room was abysmal. We had 3 lights in the room, you know, 2 of them kind of like desk lamps and one of them like a standing lamp. Only 2 of the 3 worked. There was a knob that was broken off of the 3rd one. There were no overhead lights, recessed lighting, anything like that. So trying to make a video, I'd have to do it in the middle of the day, you know, leave the show, have the blinds open, have myself positioned just perfectly, all that kind of stuff. So that wasn't great. I mean, you know, I've stayed at a number of different hotels, some of them really good, stuff like, you know, the Mount Washington in New England or the Balsams, and some of the stuff kind of like hidden gems, and some of the stuff just kind of adequate, you know, stuff in New York City that might not be hotels anymore because they've been moved into condos, stuff in New York City that I've been to that has been terrible, that I would never go back to because it's too small or dirty or unkept. I've been to stuff overseas, or you know, tropical vacations that, you know, are either hidden gems or run down. You know, again, I would say the Claridge is adequate amongst all those ones. I've had very good experiences and very not good experiences, and this is just okay. So again, I would probably, if I was gonna go back, I'd probably look for something different, but I would probably not go back to Atlantic City as we just talked about. So the traffic was a nightmare. That was something that everybody was saying. It was difficult if you were driving in. It was difficult if you were Ubering. It was difficult if you were walking around because there were so many people that had to walk. Just a nightmare. You know, there was space once you got into the venue. It was better for foot traffic in the venue than Chicago, so that's a positive. You know, Chicago was packed. I think they're going to have more space available next year because they know that they're going to expect attendance to be similar to what it was at least this year. It might not be the same as it was last year, but even if it is the same as it was last year, they're going to need more space. So I think that's a change that they're going to make. But yeah, so not good. Wi-Fi is something that there's been no shortage of conversation about, and it was also abysmal. You could have paid, I think, $80. I don't know if it was $80 for the week or $80 a day to get Wi-Fi access. I didn't do that. I don't know how that would have been. I didn't really need it as much, and this is one of the things that I don't think a lot of people, I think some people have talked about, really Cage and Andrew on Luca Tiger LeBron's, I think, have talked about this, and a few other people. If you know the values of your cards, whether you have to go outside and research it and come back the next morning and hope the card is there, or if you've done your research, if, you know, for me, I have a very specific honed in PC, and I know a good chunk of what I'm looking for in the values there. If you know your values, you can do very well at the National. First off, you can act quickly whether or not you have Wi-Fi. Second of all, if there isn't Wi-Fi, and having that knowledge and having that information, sometimes you can find stuff that's undervalued and you just know. And sometimes it's not undervalued because the person doesn't know. Sometimes it's undervalued because a dealer just wants to make a deal. We'll talk more about that later as well. But Wi-Fi was definitely an issue if you're trying to also create content or share news and information. I think Sports Card Radio said it seems like what's happening in Atlantic City is staying in Atlantic City because of the Wi-Fi issues and internet connectivity in general. So that was definitely an issue, but I did find spots where I could find it and get, you know, better reception. Again, being able to get in there early was a benefit because when there's less people in there, we could get service, both cell service and Wi-Fi. But my cell service in general was pretty bad, but I think that's more of a my phone issue, more so than the service issue. But anyway. Crowds. I thought that the crowds in the foot traffic was very good in terms of the attendance. Talking to a lot of the dealers, like I said, I talked to a lot of them. I'd ask how the show's going, and I'd always try to ask what were their thoughts compared to last year. So a lot of the thoughts that I have, you know, really stem from being educated by the dealers, not just my own personal experience, but hearing from their experience. And a lot of them were saying the foot traffic is good. There were definitely hot spots in the room in terms of traffic and people walking around and, you know, where the crowds would congregate. But I definitely thought that there was a good number of people, even knowing that it was a difficult location for a lot of people to get to, and there were people that were missing that couldn't make it to the show. So it was good attendance, not the best attendance, not as good as it was in the year prior, but I would say it was good attendance. Now, with the people that were walking around, I also talked to dealers and I was asking, you know, how's the show going in terms of deals? They were telling me that there seemed to be a lot more people that were there to window shop or to kind of kick the tires on stuff, you know, say, okay, I'll come back for that, didn't come back for it. So a little bit more of, you know, people not wanting to make deals, not necessarily wanting to spend the cash, or, you know, there were a lot of people that also were walking up to dealer booths that were saying, hey, are you buying? On the flip side, I personally ran into fewer people in terms of dealers that were looking to buy than last year. So it definitely is a two-way street there. It seemed like both people, and the economy is definitely a factor in terms of the sports card market, but overall markets, I think people are a little bit more shy to just throw cash on the table as opposed to last year. It seemed like people were, you know, much more eager to do that. I thought that was interesting. The thing I also noticed is there were definitely dealers that had very high prices on their cards, and there are other dealers that definitely had prices that were priced to move. And the dealers who had things priced what seemed to me to be appropriately, whether it was at comps or, you know, kind of adjusted for, just like they would ask a you know, participant like myself to do, you know, taking off eBay fees. If you're using eBay comps, obviously you're not paying those fees, so sometimes they would adjust for that. Those dealers seem to be doing fine. I know I heard Card Collector 2, Ryan, say that he sold out of his inventory and had probably the best sales day that he's ever had at any show, let alone the National. And that's because from talking to him, he had all of his stuff priced right in line with comps. The dealers who had their stuff priced above comps said, geez, you know, deals are pretty slow this year. People just want to trade. So I think that the dealers who had a little bit more reasonable prices, it was easier to move those things. I think also the people who had stuff that was a little bit more liquid, the stuff that trades less frequently is harder to price, harder to come to a valuation on. The stuff that trades regularly is easier to price and easier to come to a valuation on. So those were some of my thoughts around the deals. It really depended on what your inventory was and what your prices were as to how much volume of sales. But I really saw a split between dealers that said this show was the best I've ever seen, or great, or just the same as last year, and people who said, oh, it's slower than last year. There were definitely some themes and some reasons why. The other thing that I want to talk about is SGC slabs. Last year we started seeing more and more SGC slabs. PSA was shut down. BGS was shut down. There were a lot of SGC slabs in the room, and people did not seem shy to grab those. This year, it seemed like people were not as eager to grab them. Some dealers that had an overabundance of SGC slabs saw that the deals were slower from my vantage point. So it seems like they're being $18 submissions through PSA. PSA's been turning stuff around in a reasonable time frame. BGS is turning things around in about the same time frame, but they are open. They're not closed anymore. People don't want SGC as much as they did a year before. Not to say that they don't want any. I definitely pick up some SGC slabs. I know other people did, but it's just not in as high demand because there is so much more competition out there for grading from the big dogs. Not talking about some of the new upstarts and all that. We're talking about PSA, BGS, SGC, and a very distant fourth, CSG. On the topic of CSG, I did not see many dealers with any slabs outside of those top three. I didn't see many dealers with CSG slabs. I didn't see many dealers with, stuff like GMA or even some of the RCR stuff like DCI. I didn't see many of those, if any, out at dealer booths. Not to say that's a bad thing. That's your own take. I personally don't want those in my collection as much as I want PSA, BGS, or the distant third in SGC. So those are some thoughts there. The final thought on grading is the BGS renders. We've heard lots of conversation already on social media, so I wanted to add my thoughts and my experience to that conversation. So Joe and I were behind the BGS booth and saw those, oversized renders of the BGS slabs. So we stopped for a moment and I said, "Hey Joe, what do you think of those?" We, by all accounts, have always been big fans of the BGS slabs. We've liked them when we were growing up. We still like them today. It's my PC preference to have most, if not all, of my cards. If I had the choice, they would be in BGS slabs. I like the internal sleeves. I like the subgrades. I like the thickness of the slabs. I like the look of the slabs. For everything in a BGS 8.5 and above. So that's the one qualifier there. Anything below an 8.5, I would prefer them in either an SGC or PSA, probably PSA if I had to pick, but some of them look good, especially die cuts and stuff like that, in the SGC with the black matting. So that's kind of where I stand currently. But looking at those BGS renders, neither Joe or I were big fans. We don't like the new logo. I understand the company's perspective on branding themselves as the new Beckett, but that's not the focus that I think the company needs to be focused on. I don't want to make this into a whole opinion piece on BGS and their moves and all that kind of stuff. Just focusing on what we saw. So we don't really like the new B. Neither one of us really care for that. I understand their reasoning. I don't necessarily agree with it. But the overall look of the slabs, not a big fan. What it looks like is they're taking that silver slab, like I said, I like for 8.5 and above, and moving that for everything 8.5 and below. I'm not sure if a BGS 9 is also included in that, or if it's just 8.5 and below. Might be 9s and below. And then the gold flip will be for 9.5s and, min 10s, if you will, pristine 10s. And then the black label will be for those that are all 10s for all the subs. The look of the slab, in my opinion, doesn't look better than what they currently have. I don't know if they're trying to go with thinner. Again, these are just renders, so we're just seeing a flat 2D image, essentially. We're not seeing the full 3-dimension. From the renders, it also looks like they might be getting rid of that internal sleeve. I hope that's not the case, but that's what it looks like. It looks like they're going with kind of the border around the edges and a cutout for the corners. Again, that sleeve to me is a big selling point, and it's something that I like a lot. If they're getting rid of that, that's one more thing that I liked that they're getting rid of. Not a fan of that. So as Joe and I were discussing those thoughts and sharing our dismay over what those looked like, Jeremy Murray walked out the back of the BGS slab, or the BGS booth, and very quickly walking to get to another meeting or what have you. And as he overheard what we were saying, which was nice, he stopped and went back to us and said, "Hey guys, I heard your feedback. I appreciate it." Not that we were saying it at him, but just so you know, those are renders and we're just trying to get feedback right now. Those are not the final copies. They are not finished and finalized. So thank you for sharing your feedback. I'm taking feedback in this week to make adjustments. Now, there's been some consternation online as to how final those designs are, putting some money into the marketing, into those renders, into t-shirts with similar types of renders on them. Seems like there are some pieces of it that might be finalized more so than he's letting on in that very quick conversation. That was all the whole conversation that we had with him. It really wasn't any back and forth. It was just he overheard us and wanted to let us know that. So I wanted to share that with you as well. It seems like there is still a little bit of a window for us to share our feedback as collectors. I know Beckett has the stance of, do we wait for the collecting community, which tends to be a little bit more resistant to change, to tell us what they want, or do we tell them what we think that the current collector base needs? I think it's probably a little bit of a balance. You don't want to tell people that something that they like is wrong. There are things that I like that it seems like they're getting away with and telling me it's wrong. But in that instance, Joe doesn't know who Jeremy Murray is, and he says, well, I don't know who that guy is, but I feel heard. I said, well, he's kind of the head honcho there at BGS Grading, so if there's somebody you want to be heard by, it's probably him. So left a good feeling for him. Don't know how far that messaging got, if they were sharing that with more people than just that one little instance with us. Hopefully it was being shared with more people, and other people also felt heard. We'll see their actions from here. But at first glance, in a 2D render, not a fan of what those look like. We will wait and see. But again, this is also causing me pause, because we talked about some of those cards that I'm not sure what I want to do in their current state and being slabbed. I don't want to send something into BGS and get one of those new slabs. I don't want to be the first test guinea pig and get something back, a product that I don't like. I haven't heard a lot of information from them, which is part of one of the issues that we have all had with BGS, is the information is a little bit slow in coming out. But I haven't heard when they're trying to make that change to the new slabs and how much longer they're going to be doing the old slabs. Obviously, turnaround times on the current process for grading with BGS is not great, so I don't want something to be in progress with BGS and expecting to get the old slabs that I like, and then all of a sudden my card's still with them and now they switched to the new slabs. So it's one of those situations. If anybody from Beckett's listening to this, hopefully you guys communicate with us what the route is going to be that you're going to choose with that, or if you give us the option or what have you. So those are my thoughts. That's been my experience with the National. I tried to keep it as short and concise as possible, but giving you the rundown of Tuesday to Sunday, full week, no doubt. So if there's any questions, let me know. If there's anything that I missed, shoot me a DM. If there's any names that I missed, I'm sorry, but I really genuinely enjoyed meeting every single person that I ran into, whether I met you for the first time or it's been multiple times. It was so much fun for sure, and I can't wait to do it again. Not sure if it'll be Chicago or Cleveland or both, but time will tell. Obviously those plans are a year away, but if you're looking to go to the National next year, it's not too early to start planning. It's definitely not too early to get your hotel room. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss any videos in the future. New videos dropping once or twice a week, depending on my plans for the week if I'm in National. We do pack openings, looks into my PC, grading card reveals, occasionally collector interviews, and so much more. Thanks. We'll talk later.